And you want to have it
Okay.
you want to have it on gallery view with everybody. Sorry.
I'm on gallery view.
That's fine.
Yeah, I'm on gallery view. So we're good. So welcome everyone. It's nice to have everybody with us. And I'm going to just start out by giving our little introduction, which is that Christian and I are both two women who've had fairly extensive, very extensive experience in the field of addictions, both personally and professionally. And we wrote a book, which was published earlier in 2020, called, yes, here we are, Addiction, One Cause, One Solution. And it describes a new understanding of mental health and addiction. So many of you are already familiar with this. For anyone who's tuning in new, it's for anyone really at any point of where you are in your recovery. If you have someone in your life who is in recovery, this book is for you. Or if you're a professional working in the field of addiction, the book is for you. So we are taking these monthly webinars to sort of go through the book and expand on some of the topics and see if we can help to clarify it for people if they have questions or you want to discuss things. And so we are going to, what we do for this first part of the group is that we ask people to turn off your cameras, which you've all done, thank you. And we're muting everybody so that it's just Christian and myself for confidentiality purposes. And then at the end of our talk, which is about 20 minutes into it, we will stop the recording and invite everybody to turn on your cameras and join the conversation. So with that, we're going to get started. And today we're going to be talking about one of our favorite topics, which is innate mental health and resilience. Hey, Margaret, would you mind just turning off your camera and muting yourself for us? Margaret, would you mind? Yeah, would you just turn off your camera for us? We're going to just keep people confidential. Thank you. Okay. So today's topic is innate mental health and resilience. And this is one of Christian's favorite topics. So I'm going to let her begin and we'll take it from there. Okay.
Thank you, Barbara. Thanks. Yeah, and I think one of the reasons it's something I love to talk about and reflect on is because it really was my first major insight into the principles. But perhaps before I talk a little bit about that, I could just backtrack, to how I understood things before I came across this inside out understanding that is the focus of our book. It's not our understanding. We both stumbled across it and have been working in that field since we stumbled across it. But I for many years, or at least in my 20s, I was working as a lawyer. I wasn't involved in the field of mental health or psychology or anything like that. And hit a crisis of addiction, and my drinking got completely out of control, and I hit a real sort of rock bottom, and luckily for me, stumbled into a recovery program and have stayed sober ever since. And I am incredibly grateful for that recovery program, which was it embodied the sort of received wisdom of the time, which was that addiction was a threefold illness, physical, mental, and spiritual, and my life had become so chaotic at the end of the period that I was drinking that I was willing to, I was willing to accept that. It never entirely sat right with me, but I was really willing to do whatever it took for my life to improve, for my quality of life to improve, because I'd been very, very unhappy and chaotic and just a shambles up until that period. And people told me things about myself that basically, and they had, and it was interesting because they had different views. There wasn't a consistent view. So some people were of the view that addicts and alcoholics were born that way, and had that was a kind of inherited characteristic, a flaw, a personality disorder, a learning disability, a number of different theories about that, and others sort of something that you kind of drank your way into, and that the personality, the psyche was damaged by the addictive drinking, the out of control behavior, and all of that stuff. And things would be said, that it's, along the lines of, it's taken me years to get to create the chaos, the rock bottom that propelled me into recovery. So it's going to take years to kind of repair the damage. And that there was something, all the different theories had it in common, a kind of idea that we were broken or damaged people who needed to work really hard to kind of be okay. And if we worked really hard and constantly, that we'd have a chance at being, almost normal. And I kind of, I suppose I kind of took that on, and I was certainly willing to work very hard, and again, because I wanted a different quality of life. And then there came, but what I discovered was that despite all this hard work, the peace of mind and serenity seemed to be elusive for me. I mean, and I don't want to be ungrateful for what I got, and I realized that anyone who had an opinion about what addiction was really was sharing their best wisdom with me. There was no malice in it, but I found myself struggling very hard and still having lots of ups and downs, and judging myself for having these ups and downs, and yeah, and I was still a lot of kind of chaos in my life, and then I began, after more than a decade of this, maybe I began to really question some of the things I was learning. I began to think, God, I mean, in terms of being a sort of moral a degenerate or something like that, I was never that bad. I mean, my life had become humiliating, and I was certainly unable to control my drinking. I was certainly lost control of that. But the whole idea of kind of apologizing for my existence, or endlessly looking at defects and all, it began to have less and less, it seemed less and less relevant to me. And I began to have a sort of series of insights for myself, but this was long before I came across the principles, and including the insight that if I'm going to have any quality of life, I have to start listening to myself, and I didn't exactly know even what that meant, but I knew there was something about it. I knew that I was constantly second guessing myself. I was constantly sort of trying to be good rather than trusting my own inner voice to just come through, and my own guidance to just come through on its own. And I stumbled across the principles when I thought I was on a course for something else altogether. And principles is just another name for the inside out understanding, 3 principles in inside out understanding. And I heard someone say at this weekend course that I was on, which was supposed to be about business development, that nobody's broken, you're not broken, nobody's broken. And I don't know what it wasn't just the words, but there was something about my readiness to hear that, my own experience of the futility of trying to fix myself. And it hit me like a train, really. I just thought, that's absolutely true. I am not broken. Nobody is broken. And I also saw that I had never been broken. And that doesn't mean that there was any denial of, really some hairy things happened in my life when I was drinking. There's no denial of that. There's no denial of the loss of control that I experienced. but I saw that for me, this idea that we're not broken is another way of saying the same thing, that there is an essence within each of us that can't be broken, that's whole and unlimited, irrespective of what we've done, what's happened. And that essence was what came through in my literal, almost literal gutter moment when I caught sight of myself in a shop window in the city centre and hated what I'd become. And then the next thing was I had a moment of insight, a moment of clarity, that I was done with drinking. I couldn't do it anymore. And it's only with the benefit of hindsight that the power of that insight becomes obvious, because in that moment, the compulsion to drink, which was a daily thing for me, I mean, I couldn't get through even a few hours of the day without drinking. It was lifted from me, and I didn't have to, didn't have to drink again. And I think that's one of many examples of what this innate essence, this innate well-being, this wellspring within each of us, that it comes out, it expresses itself in many ways, including in the power of our thinking to create feelings, which we've talked about on other webinars and we'll be coming back to again. But it's this immense creative wellspring is what the inside out understanding is really talking about. And I think both of us would invite you not to accept our word for it, but and I know many of you are quite familiar with this as people in different stages of exploring this discovery. But the more you look for yourselves, I am confident the more you will find evidence of this unlimited supply within, this unlimited essence within. And it's a very different, well, it's not a model. I mean, what we are pointing to, I think we would both say, is that there's a truth about this, and but you can see it for yourself. And it's very different from that idea that as human beings we can become broken and then need a lot of work to kind of re-knit ourselves, and a lot of effort. And the extraordinary thing is that the moment that anyone begins to wake up to our innate well-being, the minute that happens, the more it seems to show up. That has been my experience in my own life, but it's also been the experience I've had of watching other people working with other people. And it's just quite extraordinary, and quite delightful. And Barbara and I were talking recently, was it yesterday, Barbara, the day before, but you said something which I have also seen, that you can actually notice when somebody begins to to waken up. You spoke about you could sometimes see it with people listening deeply with a tilted head. I actually notice it in the eyes. It literally as if somebody has switched up the lights or something like that. So that's probably a good point for me to pass it over to you, Barbara, to say more about how you would talk about this chapter and this aspect.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that moment that the light comes on, when someone really starts to see it as one of the most incredible things. And what this understanding, I think, does for us is it helps us to understand how we can point people more towards that. I like to think of this, I'm going to talk a little bit more about resilience, innate resilience, and sort of our psychological design, because for those of you who've been listening, I have been for many years, up until December 1st of this year, a psychotherapist. And I have now retired from that and will be doing full-time this work, this understanding, without that that connection to the psychotherapeutic world. But we are we have a psychological immune system. If we didn't, if we weren't able to handle life as it came along to us, we would not fare very well. Think about it. Sid Banks used to always say that life is a contact sport. You get banged around. There's a lot of stuff that goes on. And just like with the body's immune system, although they now have discovered at least 3 immune systems, and I think they'll probably discover more, the complexity and the incredible things that our body is capable of doing. So this psychological immune system that we have, is the one that allows us to be able to get through life, to recover from life's knocks. Again, if you didn't have that, by the time you were like 6, you'd be pretty beaten down, after you fell off the jungle gym and broke your arm, or watched your dog get run over by a car, or whatever came along. So it doesn't mean that we aren't impacted by what we see, but we begin to see that, and particularly once we correct the misunderstanding of the fact that we have to do something about this, or we have to go back into the past to heal it, or to bring it up and to make it go away. We have to do all this work on it, like Christian was referring to, and we have to, we're damaged goods forever because these things happen to us. These are all misunderstandings that we're able to move beyond, and to see that they were never based in truth. They were theories that made sense at the time. I can understand how people thought that, we were broken. And then, of course, as I've said many times, both in the book and in these talks, the modern psychology has become a very pathology-based focus. And so to get psychiatric care, you have to have some pathology. And, the more pathologies, the more diagnoses you can have, the better off you are as a mental health practitioner, because the powers that be will stay off your case if you can prove how broken someone is. So when you look in that direction, and that's the direction that the misunderstanding or the old paradigm was looking in, it really does look true to you that we're all broken, because that's what we're looking at. We're looking through that lens that makes it look like, yeah, I'm broken. And because I'm broken, and I'm so broken because of whatever has happened in my life, or this illness, disease that I have, it looks like it's a lifelong process. What I love about this understanding is being able to shed that, to be able to step out of it, and to see, this untarnished essence that Christian is talking about, or this innate resilience, this innate psychological immune system that we all have. When you start to step into that, everything starts to shift in these extraordinary ways. Now, again, when someone is in the throes of addiction, and we mention this in the book, when someone's in the throes of addiction, it's really hard to see that they are psychologically healthy. I had one young man who was, really in the throes of a crack addiction, and his behaviors were getting him into all kinds of problems. And I remember saying to him at one point, there's nothing wrong with you. And I thought he would, really fall over dead laughing, So that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to people. when you're seeing the behaviors that show up. And we're going to talk more about behaviors in a couple of weeks or a couple of months when we talk again. But when you really start to see beyond that, beyond the surface, beyond to this deeper truth of how it is we all work, the operating system, this incredible, incredible operating system that our minds have to move beyond the things that happen to us. One of my clients who's an older person, anybody on this call who's a little bit older may remember this, but we used to have these clowns that were punching bags when we were little. And so it was weighted on the bottom. So you'd punch this clown and he would bounce back up. And you'd punch him again, he'd bounce back up, because it was the way it was weighted, the way it was created was such that it just kept coming back to center, and it would find its center of gravity, and it would be erect again. So that's really the way I see this, is that we have, as part of our design, that's a part of it. Now, again, we may not have understood how we could access it. We may not have understood that it in fact worked that way. We may have bought into hook, line, and sinker this idea, as we've been talking about, that we're broken and we have all this work to do to fix ourselves. But that doesn't mean that it isn't true. And once you start to really be in alignment with truth, there's so much power in that, that it just is like rocket fuel. It just puts you into a totally different relationship with yourself, with your mind, with your capacity to live life in a healthier, more well-balanced, and much more easeful way. And that's what's really exciting about this. We literally are doing sort of a 180 from the way the recovery field has been looking at this, from, again, this theory that looks true on the surface, to one that is true and always has been true and always will be true, which is what a principle is. A principle is always true, whether you believe it or not, whether you see it or not. It's just the way it is. And seeing that, again, gives you traction to be able to live your life in a way that really grounds you so powerfully, and really brings you into your innate mental health. So I think that's enough for me for now. Christian, you want to pick up there?
Just briefly, what listening to you, Barbara, reminded me, I was in a conversation with some people in recovery recently, and who don't have this understanding. And it wasn't in a situation where, where I was coaching or teaching them, I was just having a chat with them, but I could see, when you spoke about principles. So the fact of the matter is that whether we know that we have this essence of wholeness, this essence of unlimited possibility or not, it's there. But if we buy into something else, if we've bought into a rule that I'm broken or whatever, then for a lot of the time it's as though that rule were true. Although, even though insights will pop through at times, fresh thinking will pop through at times, but it's so powerful when you're believing in the rule. I mean, it can make it uses up an awful lot of bandwidth of sort of psychological bandwidth, I think, and it kind of plays out in people's lives. And I was just watching these people, and one had bought just had this many stories about a number of conditions. And it was funny because at other times she was just completely great, present, and then she'd start to talk about her anxiety and all the ramifications of that, and so she had this sincere belief in her anxiety and no awareness of wholeness that didn't require working at, and somebody else had something else, and so on. And that's, it just struck me how fortunate I am to have stumbled across this, and why I love the work that I do, that we do now, sharing this with other people, because it's um those stories are so compelling, and they can last a lifetime, without, when people have innocently bought into them. But the minute that you begin to wake up to something deeper, something truer, something more constant, change happens, in my experience.
In mine as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know, maybe this is a good time to stop and open it up. What do you
Yeah,
think, Christian?
that
Okay,
sounds
I'm going
great.
to stop recording and we will